All right, sounds good. It looks like we're live now on the YouTube channel. This will be publicly saved on the NJIT ACM YouTube channel. I think we're gonna give it a few minutes before we're announced, and then we'll start the tech talk.
Okay, sounds good. Just let me know when I need to share.
Yep, sounds good. Thanks. Yeah, all right. It looks like we're here a little early. I guess in the meanwhile, Mike, would you like to start sharing your slideshow?
Sure.
Thank you. All right, good. We can see it. We're just going to have it projected in the rooms and have it shown on the YouTube in just a few minutes.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, then it seems like we have about 34 people, 40 people currently in the YouTube channel watching live. So I don't suppose anyone would mind if we get started a few seconds early. So I'm very excited to introduce our next Tech Talk, Red versus Blue, Choose Your Own Adventure. So this Tech Talk will be including speakers Eric Hansen and Mike Thompson. And Eric is an offensive services manager at FRSecure, and Mike Pinky Thompson is an incident response team lead also at FRSecure. Eric and Mike, we are so excited to have you here, and without further ado, please enlighten us.
Thank you, Sri. Glad to be here. So first thing, just so everyone knows what they're in for, this is not a broken date down here in the bottom right corner. We have 72,022 slides. So I hope everyone brought a drink and has a snack so they can get through this. Yeah, it looks like I messed up a date there. Be okay though. So yeah, so red versus blue, choose your own adventure. I'm on the blue side, Eric's on the red side of the house here, so we thought it'd be fun to kind of walk through both of those and talk to you a bit about what that looks like and ways you can get there and pick your side of where you want to work and that type of thing. So we'll go ahead and get started here just with a quick look at the agenda. We'll start out just talk a little bit about ourselves on the next slide here. Then we're going to talk a little bit about blue team. More of the defensive. The digital forensics and incident response side there with that. So that'll be me talking about that there. Then we'll get into the red team side of things with so offensive operations and penetration testing, and Eric will be talking a bit about that. We'll talk a little bit about why it's good to know both, and then what do we do to sort of move toward one side or the other, depending on what you want to do. All right. So first one here, and I'll go first since I'm already talking, and then I'll hand it over to Eric. So as was noted, my name is Mike Thompson. Generally go by Pinky though, so if you're ever talking to folks from FRSecure, just reference Pinky. That'll get you to me. I am our incident response team lead here, so doing a lot of the training of our guys and our team and getting everybody up to speed, as well as kind of in the background helping folks work through cases and things as we get incident response and forensics engagements in. And then doing a fair amount of these talks. I think Eric and I, we talk a fair bit. So, Eric, I'll let you go.
Yeah, thanks. I don't do nearly as much talking as Pinky does, but my name's Eric Hansen, as it says here on the slide, and as Sarah said, offensive services manager, which means I manage, our penetration testing, social engineering, scanning, anything that's kind of going out and doing that type of things. I manage that team, and been penetration testing for a bit now, and kind of worked up as a penetration tester to the lead to the manager, and yeah. Looking forward to being able to talk about this, as Mike kind of hit on, but, as far as I know, about half the people registered for this event are students, and we felt like it'd be a good thing. I get a lot of questions all the time about, getting to know more about these roles, how to get into these roles, what to do, to get into these roles. And so we thought this would be a good topic, and I hope you guys learn something from it or get something out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, cool. Well, thanks, Eric. All right, let's jump in here. So first one here, you can't be blue. Blue's a color, so let's get that out of the way up front here. But I just want to talk a little bit about sort of what we do on the blue side or the defensive side, the incident response side, that type of aspect of this. So one thing we like to talk about that I don't think a lot of people realize is that we do work on a lot of preventative measures, a lot of pre-attack type stuff. Because realistically, I'm sure everyone here is awesome, and I'd love to talk to you. But I want to talk to you not in an event, not when you're having an incident. I want to talk to you before that, and let's try to prevent that incident and that type of thing. We do a lot of that at FRSecure in other ways, but I'm going to talk, primarily from the incident response side of our house, and so we do a lot of things like helping folks work through your incident response plan. Make sure you have your plan up to date. Make sure that you know where to find it. Make sure you have a copy in case your SharePoint server is encrypted. Things like that. But walking through what happens when an incident does occur. And we say it a lot at this point. It feels kind of cliche, but in most instances in a corporate environment, it's not a matter of if you're going to have an incident. It's when. So being able to respond to that appropriately and being able to investigate that appropriately and everything can save a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of headache. So we do a lot of work on that. We'll do things like instant response tabletops, and for my fellow nerds in the crowd who love Dungeons and Dragons, you can kind of think about it like that, right? We'll lay out a scenario, work through some prompts, and say, okay, you see this on this server, that type of thing. What do you do next? And then we work through that, and it's all mental exercises. It's all outside of an incident. We're kind of trying to simulate that incident as best we can without having an incident, and that's to allow you to practice your instant response plans, practice your procedures, um, figure out the gaps in those before you have an incident, before it's really a problem. And those are great exercises. I love doing those. I think most of our team really enjoys doing those. We almost always will find some kind of gap. There's something, one of my favorite ones was a fairly large organization, and we're working through this, and we're talking about backups, and we were simulating a ransomware attack in this one, and so in this one in particular, we said, okay, so your servers are encrypted, your backups are encrypted. What do you do now? And they were like, well, we have offline backups of this. In particular, we're talking about this really critical database system they have. And they did have offline backups. They were available. They were unencrypted in this scenario. But they only had one person on the entire team who knew how to restore those backups and how to use those. And funny enough, on the call, the guy had to step away to handle, family emergency or something like that. And so he wasn't available to tell them how to restore those backups. It was a really great exercise for them to realize that they have this really single point of failure that could be a huge problem for them, whereas they thought they had covered everything. And so those types of exercises are great, as well as we'll do things like threat hunting. Maybe you don't have an active incident, but you want to take a peek around your environment and see if anything is going on that shouldn't be. Things like that to kind of prevent that bigger attack. So beyond that, when those fail, or if they fail, you're going to be investigating attacks on the blue team. So noted here, there's a couple of different paths, right? And so just in my case, I'm speaking mostly from the consultative blue team. So we're, FRSecure is a consulting firm. So we're coming in to work with different clients, kind of, dropping into environments to do things. It's not quite the same as a corporate environment where your environment very well. You're constantly working to improve that, and so I'll break it up a little bit and just kind of to start that a little bit there. From the corporate side, the corporate blue team side, right? You're going to be more working closely with other folks in your environment, other folks in IT, other folks in security. Maybe you have a corporate red team as well, working with them to shore everything up and make sure that there aren't any larger attacks, but also doing that day-to-day threat hunting. The day-to-day investigations of, we got an alert from malware on this system. Let's go take a look at that. Let's see what's going on. We see some strange network attack or activity over here. Let's take a look at that and see what's going on. So from a more corporate, one organization blue team standpoint, that's the type of things you're going to be doing. From a more consultative, which is, like I said, this is where I live. Oftentimes we're doing those preventative measures, but then if something goes wrong, we'll get a call, maybe from a partner client that we have, or someone will refer them to us, that kind of thing. And we'll spin up a triage process. We'll hop on a call with them, talk through a little bit, hey, what do you see? What's going on? Can you give me any more information about what you're seeing? And then, if they choose to move forward and engage with us, we'll then hop into that environment, deploy some tools. No need to mention necessarily any tool names here. We use paid stuff and open source stuff. But FRSecure, we don't resell any kind of hardware, software, or anything like that. We're purely consultative. But we have tools we use, just like everyone else. So we'll pop into there. We'll drop in, and we'll start analyzing what's going on in the environment, right? So hopefully we've been able to gain some type of indicator, some type of information from that initial conversation with the client to know, hey, there's a Cobalt strike beacon, or we saw activity on, strange network activity on this device. And then realistically, we're going to take that data point and then just start moving out from there. So if we know that this device was impacted, let's review all of the logs on that. Let's look at PowerShell logs. Let's look at security logs. Let's look at firewall activity if the client has that. And let's see if any of that points us in any other direction. And it almost always does, right? We're following breadcrumbs here, if you want to think about it like that. And so in our breakout room, we were talking a little bit about this before, but honestly, there's a lot of non-glamorous stuff that happens here, right? Log review is almost no one's favorite thing to do. But it's necessary, and you have to follow those trails, and so it's a lot of that, and it's trying to figure out what's going on, what's happened, and where else there are bad things occurring, where else are these attackers in this environment, because they're almost never on just one device, in these cases. So that's a lot of what from a high level. That's kind of what's going on there. And and this last bit here, wanted to talk a little bit about this because I think a lot of folks think, oh, that's cool. You kind of, you parachute in, you're, you're on the ground, you're working through this with a client, kind of saving the day, and everything's awesome and everything, and you get to be the hero and feel great about that. And that is true to some extent, right? Hopefully, you're coming in an incident where you're able to stop an attack, you're able to help an organization see something bigger is about to happen and get that stopped. But oftentimes it's not that, right? We're there to help. We're there to really take care of people and investigate the attack fully, so we understand everything that happened. What went wrong, and what kind of recommendations we can make to help them prevent both this attack or other attacks in the future. So there's a lot of that, and like I said, some of that's unglamorous, but it is still rewarding, right? So knowing that you're leaving an organization better than when you found them is always awesome. But it's not quite the the superhero mentality that I think a lot of folks think it is. So just keep that in mind. But it is still awesome. So keep that in mind as well. And so now we'll hand it over to Eric here to talk a little bit about the red side.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, so what is red teaming? What is penetration testing? Right? It's. I think a lot of people have an idea of it, but we'll kind of dig in a little bit here. It's an attack simulation, right? And with simulations, oftentimes we have constraints, we have certain rules of engagement, certain scopes. We're trying to figure out a certain thing, right? Generally, I mean, sometimes it is the case, but generally it's not a situation where you just get pointed at a target and you just get to go out and just attack them and do whatever you want and win the game. But we're there as a tool to try to figure something out, right? And try to find flaws in a very specific area and simulate an attack on those areas and lure them out. It's more than just scanning for vulnerabilities. And this is something that luckily the industry is moving toward understanding, and other people inside, of IT roles and security roles and companies and management and stuff are starting to understand these things better. But, we still have issues with this. Sometimes people still liken a penetration test just to scan for vulnerabilities. They think if I'm just patching my systems, then we won't have any vulns show up on the scan, and thus we're fine, right? And as a penetration tester, a red teamer, that's our job, is to find more than that, right? Is to go in and take a look at more than that, to look at business flow, some of the configurations for things, how the processes are for different situations, and see if those are working correctly, if permissions are right, if we can do any kind of lateral movements that people might not realize, that a scanner couldn't detect. And so there's a lot of manual enumeration and a lot of manual attempts, a lot of different manual processes that go into figuring this stuff out. Like, yeah, we use tools, we use scanners and things like that to try to find things, to try to speed up the processes that can be sped up. But, you gotta be able to have an attention to detail, to be able to think outside of what you're looking at and try to understand how it was implemented and what our flaws might exist in those things. Understanding how things work is more important than memorizing CVEs. Just like I just said, it is a very manual thing. A scanner can find CVEs, right? Automated tools can find those things, and CVEs are going to help you, if you're in this role, get all kinds of different wins and find all kinds of different flaws and things like that. But knowing how things work and how they are implemented and how things behave in different situations is something that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of development in general and a lot of learning to kind of get to that point. But it's not something that you can easily search, right? You can search to, hey, how does this protocol work? Or how does this software do what it does? Or how does this vulnerability, flaw or exploit work? But it's much easier to find a version and search and find a CVE than it is to find a software and search and spend days trying to figure out how it works. So having that understanding of how all this stuff works and what the possibilities and whatnot is really useful. There's many different paths and foci, right? So as Pinky just talked about a second ago, kind of differences between corporate and consultative, kind of mirror that here on this side. There's pros and cons to both sides of it, right? And I'd say that it's genuinely pros and cons. I think some people see it as just one's better than the other type of thing, but in a corporate environment, you're comfortable looking at what you're looking at. You get a lot of time to understand the organization's tools or systems or whatever they're using, their applications. If you're doing a web application penetration testing internal for a corporation, you get a lot of time to understand how that works. You might even be able to have insider knowledge on the code, source code, see things and be able to analyze it from all kinds of different angles, work with that programming team, the development team, and understand certain areas that they might think are deficits, et cetera. You're going to have a lot more information, a lot more time, a lot more familiarity with it, right? And consultative side, on the other hand, you're not going to have all of that. But the pro to the consultative side is you have dynamic environments. You have a new environment every other week or so, or whatever it might be. You're seeing new things. You're learning more because you're involved in more of these situations, right? And that's the con to the corporate side, is that you're generally looking at the same thing over and over again, right? And so, think about those things. If you're looking to get into these types of careers, think about those types of things. And what kind of appeals to you. Additionally, you can focus on so many different areas within penetration testing. I think a lot of people talk about it, or red teaming too. A lot of people talk about it as kind of just a general path, right? But there's so many different areas. There's, external and internal network. Everybody's generally pretty familiar with those. And application, generally people think about web applications or mobile applications, but obviously there's just standard native desktop applications and stuff that are going to do certain things that need to be tested. Physical penetration testing. Can we get into a building? Can you break in physically? Can you pick locks? Can you do things like that? Can you bypass entry systems through different ways, or request exit systems, et cetera? Those are definitely focus areas there for that. Social engineering, same kind of thing. Can you send a good email campaign? Can you get someone to do something you want? A lot of people think about the phishing aspect of it. But there's obviously vishing too, calling people up, trying to get them to jump on a troubleshooting session with you, share their desktop, let you take control and do something. Additionally, there's in-person physical social engineering testing, right? Where you can go in and try to convince someone that you're with whatever, MSP, and you got to come in and take a look at their servers or whatever it might be. Hardware testing as well. Some people, think of hacking either as one of the hardware or more software. I'd say I've seen the term thrown around so much, but penetration testing definitely affects the hardware side of things, and seeing what kind of information to be pulled off of a chip, or maybe some kind of analysis of signals and whatever. And definitely a huge area out there for that. And research can play in the part of all of them. It could be a separate research area, and there's so many other areas too. This is a really, really broad area of concentration, and I think that it's important that if you're looking to get into something like this and get into this field and do these things, that you start to focus on an area and start to think about what you're interested in, and realizing that you don't have to know necessarily how to do all of them. Focus on those areas. And the last thing here, kind of similar to what Pinky said at the end of his, it's like, want to be a professional hacker? Well, you should probably be prepared to be a script kiddie. The reality is that while many people in certain situations, especially if you have a decent amount of research side of what you're doing, you'll have time to potentially find your own CVEs, 0 days, whatever, and then develop tools and develop attacks and whatever you might want to try to do. But most of the time, the reality is that you're working off of someone else's research and someone else's experience and someone else's proof of concept, right? You're trying to find the things and the tools that'll let you do your job as quickly as you can, and be able to get good coverage and provide a lot of feedback and information and find the problems. And so you're running a lot of other people's scripts. You're doing research kind of off of the research someone else has already done. You're doing it off their shoulders, and kind of piggybacking on that. And that's okay. That's good. That's what we need. We're trying to simulate what someone else is going to do. So we need to know what they're going to do. We got to know what they've done. And that's a lot of kind of what we're working with here.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, and so we'll move on here to this one, the purple puddles. And this is something Eric and I have recently gotten to work a little more on together and that type of thing. And I personally think these are a lot of fun, right? So, kind of what is a purple team here? We're going to run through that a little bit. And, Eric, you want to kind of, you've probably talked about it a bit already, but do you want to dig into sort of how we approach these from the red side of the purple?
Yeah, and I'll take a minute here too to kind of discuss just general methodologies, right? What I was talking about a lot of before was kind of just general penetration testing, right? But there's different ways we can go about that too, and there's different methodologies, and we can have what's considered white box, black box, somewhere in between with a gray box, right? And those are all just referring to different amounts of knowledge, right? Different amounts of information that is given up ahead of time, or different resources that are given ahead of time to help speed up and make more efficient the process of doing the test, right? And a lot of times when we're trying to get penetration testing done, a lot of people are doing it for some kind of requirement, some kind of stipulation with a third party or what have you. Now, when we're trying to do things like that, you're obviously trying to reduce costs for the client. You're trying to reduce time, be efficient, get things done, but still not sacrifice the work, right? So what can you take shortcuts on? You can take shortcuts on saying, hey, tell me what resources you already have out there. What are we trying to test? What's the scope of this? If we're going to do phishing or vishing, who do you want us to email? Who do you want us to call, right? We'll skip some of that stuff. But generally, when we start looking at red team and red team being a part of a purple team, we're looking more about even more closely simulating what an attacker is going to have and what they're going to be going after based off of the information they can figure out, they can glean from enumeration. And so when we're doing these simulations, a lot of times it's going in completely black box, meaning nobody's given us information other than the fact that we know the client's name. And we're starting from that. And so it's going to change the angle of the attack, the vectors, right? It's going to, we might not know about one of the hosts, so we might completely not see it and not go after it, or maybe the initial part of our attack is going to be focused on the areas we see first or something like that, right? But it also generally requires us to be a little bit more noisy in some of our enumeration potentially, because we have to go find some of those things. So there's side effects to that too. And then additionally, with these types of attacks, they're generally more collaborative, not only collaborative between red and blue team, but I'd say collaborative within the red team, because we're going to have different people who are focused in different areas, right? So we might have people who are focused on social engineering, and people who are focused on application testing, and people who are focused on internal testing and external testing and things like that. Everybody's going to be involved, depending on the scope, at least, and all the vectors that are kind of in scope for that. And they're going to be involved in working together to some extent, right? This is where you get the closest to, the movie style hacks of things like Sneakers, where you got a guy on comms talking to another guy who's breaking into the building, right? I mean, it's not realistic, but it's the closest you're going to get to that, where you have someone who's potentially is going on site and dropping something and then reaching back out to someone and having them, get a callback C2 or what have you from that device or something like that, and working with the people who did the phishing to take those credentials or that implant that got dropped and work with that. So there's a lot of collaboration on these things.
Yeah, definitely. And from the defensive side of that too, right? So, when we're coming into these engagements, we often don't know your defensive capabilities as well. So if you're on the blue side, you're going to figure out, okay, what does this client have? What do we have? If you're, if this is a more corporate environment, you may already have this, but what kind of detection methods do we have? What kind of firewalls do we have out there? What kind of alerting do we have set up on those? What kind of EDR? What kind of antivirus? What kind of monitoring do we have on, PowerShell script runs? Things like that you're going to look for, that you can use for these detection methods to see what the red team is actually up to. And then also too, if something is detected, what are your response actions? This is where your playbooks, your instant response playbooks, your plans come into place, and also just general security behavior. From your blue team, from your defensive side, what are they going to do when they see traffic on a server that is coming in from the outside and shouldn't be? We thought that was locked down. We didn't think that was externally available. Now we see this traffic coming in from, in this case, it would be from our red team. What do we do about that? And so, like Eric said, a lot of collaboration there too, to work with the red team to know what they're doing and help the actual client, in this case, determine what is what's a legitimate attack and what's coming from our testing and that type of thing. And then, Eric, if you want to talk about the knowledge transfer, how we kind of work through that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, similar to what I was saying before, there's differences in the way things go with general penetration testing. A lot of times it's more like a smash and grab. We're just trying to get in, test the things, figure the things out, right? Report on that information. Generally, when people are involved in red and purple team engagements, they're actually looking to test their team and want to know more about not just, okay, you tried this attack, but what exactly did you do? What exactly got sent? When did you send it? When did you do this stuff? So they can, go back to their own logs, look at things, match it up, see what they did see, what they didn't see, check their alerting and things like that. And so a lot more detailed documentation is needed for these types of things. Being able to down to the second sometimes, if not down to at least the minute, be able to talk about everything that you performed, everything you sent out, knowing sometimes what your tooling does that you might not realize it does, being aware of everything that's going to happen related to, what you're initiating and documenting that. And then collaborating with those teams, talking to them, whether it be, in a lot of situations that Pinky and I work on, Pinky's coaching a blue team at the actual organization, right? But sometimes we'll have a red team or purple team environment where maybe our blue team, our incident response team is not coaching, and we're just collaborating a lot with the team that's at the organization that we're working with. Maybe at the end of the engagement, at the end of certain milestones, or weekly, potentially multiple times a week, daily if it requires it. But just really being there as a resource for them to find the what they're missing, right? And speaking of what they're missing, let Mike kind of talk about that.
Yeah, exactly. So we're looking to find those gaps, right? What happened? Like Eric said, we're documenting these attacks as the red team does them down to the minute, sometimes the second. And then we're going to go look and see, okay, what detection device, what detection method did you have in place that should have caught this? Did it catch it? If it didn't, then let's figure out why. And so a lot of that collaboration with the blue team there, for that organization will be, okay, let's work to configure your tools better. Let's make some recommendations on how to make these tools work better for you, how to make those detections better, and and also as well as the response, right? What did you do when you saw this action? Well, we didn't do anything because it didn't look like, just look like noise. Well, it turns out that was actually part of an attack, and you should have responded accordingly. So working through that, finding those gaps, and then working to help figure out what we're missing in that blue side of it. Yeah, and so with sort of the two sides, and then talking through sort of the purple team engagement, which is a little bit of a or is very much a collaboration between both. It kind of brought us to this. It is important to know both sides of it, regardless of which side you're playing on here. So for me, on the blue team side of things, it's helpful for me to get inside the mind of an attacker, right? So I want to be thinking about things like, what do I have in this environment that's valuable for an attacker? What do I need to be maybe monitoring more than other things? What does my perimeter look like? Things like that. And then, if an attacker does gain access, what are they going to do with that access? I think this is missed a lot, right? It's like, oh, well, they got in, that's it. That's the end of it, right? No. They're going to, often look to move laterally and enumerate internal devices if they came in from the external, things like that, and try to figure out, what are they going to do with maybe whatever account they've compromised or whatever system they've compromised. And so from the blue side, I have to think about that a lot, because we're all human and we only have a limited number of hours in the day. I've got to apply those to the most likely places where an attacker would be, or the most likely attacker actions. So I've got to think about that, and then I've also got to think about, what kind of things are they going to do to avoid detection? In a lot of attacks, we'll see, just a simple batch file that goes out and disables your antivirus or disables your EDR, whatever monitoring systems you have. And a lot of those are a little bit more of a blunt instrument, right? They'll just disable any that they find. They'll be scripted out for 5 or 10 of the most popular ones or whatever. But some of them, they've done a little recon and they know your environment. They're going to use that. And so even that little bit of information there, right? Was this a broad-based disabling of any antivirus, or was this a targeted one to hit the vendor that I use? Can give you some more insight into, how that attacker's thinking and what they're doing, and maybe how long they've been in the environment, types of things like that. And then have to think about too, like, what's the end goal? Sometimes that's a ransom event. sometimes that's data exfiltration, right? Did they compromise a server that we have that has trade secrets? Did they go toward database servers primarily, which would likely indicate that they're looking for data to exfiltrate it and sell or whatever the case is? Or did they just take a broad approach, right? Or did they try to compromise an account that had access to every device and then drop malware on every device? That may lead to a different event. And even business email compromise, right? Did they compromise a help desk engineer's email account? If so, then they're probably going to try to leverage that to get other folks in the organization. Were they targeting the accounting team? And if so, then we know they're probably looking toward an ETF, a funds transfer fraud situation. And so thinking about that end goal and thinking about what attackers are going to do with that access is a huge part of the blue side, and being able to get in that attacker's mind and think through that is really critical. And I'm sure for the similar for Eric, for you on the red side.
Yeah, just like Pinky was saying, you got to get in the mind of the other side, and knowing some about how they're going to implement things, do things, how they're going to respond to things, how they might have set up something is going to be very, very useful for your attacks. One of the questions is, what is the security posture of my target? And this is, pretty broad question, but when you get into an environment, you never know kind of, what maturity level that security program is at, right? I just got a beacon call back on this host in this environment or something like that. Are these people just struggling to patch right now? Is that what they're worried about? They've got an antivirus on and they're just trying to keep up with patches, or do they have that under control? Do they have, better logging? Do they have better baselines? Do they have alerting in place off of things and things like that? And then thinking about that and trying to kind of, as quietly as possible, gain information that might start to tell you a story and give you information about, maybe even just the size of their team and what they're probably working with and what they've probably implemented at this point. If you start seeing certain things lacking in the environment, you might be able to extrapolate more information from that and decide that there's additional things that have probably not been configured correctly, or at least haven't been looked at yet. They haven't gotten to that point yet, And so you have to have some knowledge of how a lot of those things are implemented and kind of the different stages that people will go through in securing and maturing their environment, and being able to detect those things and knowing what you can do off of that. Additionally, how are they going to attack or detect the attacks? I mean, do they have that logging in place, or they have good alerting, and can they find anomalies? If not, are they just depending on that AV? Can I disable that? Can I not? Is it something else, right? Are there other services that are coming in, polling something, looking at something? Do I see service accounts running that I might be doing something else? Do I see traffic in the network that suggests something, right? And what do I need to do to try to avoid being detected? If I do get detected, what are they going to do? How are they going to respond? Are they just going to, shut a process down? Are they going to shut the whole machine down? Are they going to unplug the internet on it? Like, what are they going to do? And before I start making noise, I need to be able to be ready to respond to their response, right? I need to have backup plans. I need to know what I'm going to do in that case. In some situations, maybe I'll take advantage of that response. If I know that they're going to come investigate that machine and they're not just going to immediately lock it down, maybe I get something in place and then I try to get them to come look at that machine, because maybe I'll get new credentials. Maybe I'll be able to escalate off of their actual response. Who knows, right? And not even just defenders in this situation, knowing how people work, how different employees are going to work in different situations, how they're going to respond if something gets shut down on their system all of a sudden, whatever. There's a lot of different things that if you can put your mindset in it, you can imply some kind of responses, and then you can work around that, right? The more experience you have in general in the environment that you are attacking, the more you'll know about how you can attack it and what you might be able to do and get away with, and what you're going to have to be careful of. And all of these things we're kind of discussing are really just patterns, right? Everybody has a pattern in the way they deal with things. The attackers have a pattern generally, especially a pattern that works toward a goal. As Pinky was saying, what's the goal? If you can find something at the beginning that suggests a goal, well, and patterns that generally go toward that, then you can narrow down your search, right? But I got to look at that from that perspective of the defender. What are the defender's patterns? What are they going to be looking for? and what are they going to do in response to what I'm doing, and what is the user going to do in response to whatever I do. And if I can detect those and see those, I can respond to them and I can get ahead of them. Additionally, I mean, Pink, what are some of the patterns that you'd be looking for?
Yeah, exactly. Like you were saying, a huge one is if we kind of see something early on that might indicate the end goal, right? So oftentimes we'll see tools deployed, attacker tools, things like that we can really extrapolate that position and understand this is what they're working toward, right? If we see AD find, right, is often found out there to, it's a tool to do some Active Directory enumeration and that type of thing. If we see that in the attacker toolkit, we can often use that to know, okay, they're going to try to spread their wings here a little bit, find some more Active Directory stuff and move from there. If we find, remote access tools, some really popular ones lately, an Atera desktop, Splashtop, things like that. If we see those that are, as part of the attacker toolkit, we can know that, they've at least got some type of persistence, some way to get back into the environment a little later on and things like that. As I mentioned earlier too, even on the business email compromise side of it, if we see that they're compromising an accountant or someone in the accounting department, we likely know they're working more toward financial fraud as opposed to malware, ransomware, something like that. So we can pick up on those patterns and understand those and work through them. And some of that too is just knowing, if you find ransomware in the environment or something like that, you can often find information, TTPs about that particular attack group or folks who use that particular ransomware, and then you can use that to kind of build out that pattern and understand, okay, where are we at in this attack chain? Are we just in the recon phase? Are we, are they still doing enumeration, that type of thing? Or, are we in deployment? Are we getting really close to something bigger? And just knowing those patterns is huge. So definitely on both sides. And so, yeah, so how do we get there, right? So as Eric mentioned early on, we thought this would be really great given the audience, try to help folks figure out how to go down these paths if you want to. And this is by no means an inclusive list, just some things that we could kind of rattle off the top of off the top of our heads here about how to get to these particular career paths. And so with Blue, it is often good to have some IT background. I have a lot of IT background. That's kind of where I came from, but that helps you to understand the way systems are set up, the way things are tied together, and understand some of the mistakes that get made along the way, and how things like Active Directory work, how service accounts work, things like that. It's really helpful to know when you're on that defensive side and trying to figure some of that out and figure out what needs to be defended and how to defend it. It can be very difficult to get investigative experience. You're likely not going to be able to tag along with someone while they're doing an investigation, unfortunately. But a lot of privacy things there, and if you're working an active attack, there's a lot of legal problems that go into that. So it can be tough to do that. So that's where that IT experience comes in, but also to just reading up on articles, and we'll have some resources here in a minute as well. But one that's kind of helpful is the DFIR report .com. It's they have a lot of write-ups on attacks and attack patterns and that kind of thing, and you can get an idea of what those look like, but also just knowing systems. And I think it's probably similar for you on the red side, Eric.
Yeah, kind of similar to how you said, have some IT background. Honestly, in the red team, learning how to create or implement the things you plan to attack is nothing but helpful. It is one of those things that people come to me all the time and they say, how do I get better at testing this? Okay, internal networks, web applications, whatever it might be, right? Hardware, it doesn't matter. Learn how to create it and implement it. Go out and do it. Do it from the other side and just start to understand some of the frustrations with implementing these things, some of the shortcuts that might get taken, some of the configurations that you have to create or not create, or things you have to set up and to make things work, and how those might affect other things, right? Do you have to have that? No, but it's going to help so much. If you want to start do penetration testing or attacking, doing bug bounty programs on a web application or something like that, go develop some, go learn some of those languages, go create front ends and back ends for those, do database stuff, and learn how that stuff works, and then attack your own stuff potentially too. So you can learn from that too, right? And see, oh man, I actually made this little shortcut here thinking this was just the right way to go about it, or I used this code off of Stack Overflow or whatever it might be, and it actually had a flaw in it. The more you understand about how things behave, the better you'll be able to attack them. The second one is repetition. I mean, practice, practice, practice. We use that all over, right, for all kinds of things. But in reality, just like how on a logging system, right, when you're going to start setting up logs for all of your different things throughout your environment on the defensive side, and you have tons of noise, the biggest thing is you have to have an accurate base or base of like information, right? And you have to be able to detect anomalies off of that, right? And it's the same thing kind of for the red team. It's just slightly different. You're gonna think when you first start off on this stuff, whether it be something like a hack the box, or you're working on an OSCP and you're in that lab, or you got a boot to root, you download it off of VulnHub or whatever it might be, you're gonna be looking at it, and every single thing you see is going to be interesting. Every single one. You're going to be Googling everything, right? You're not going to know what's unimportant and what is important. It's a needle in a haystack situation. You have to get a baseline, right? So you got to do so much of this repetition to get to a point where you understand what always is there and what's not always there. What actually sticks out? What is the anomaly in this situation? That's going to make you faster at figuring these things out. It's going to make you actually be able to identify what might be useful versus what is not. And then on top of it, it's going to increase the speed at which you're able to do those things because you're used to doing them so much, and it'll make you much more efficient and much better. Local groups and meetups. This is, really, really, really beneficial depending on where you're located. Obviously, this is going to be different for different people. I'm in a pretty small town type area, and I don't have any local groups or meetups where I'm at. We used to have a DC group. It went away. But, if you have things like that, local groups, meetups, whether it be, hack related, penetration testing related, security related or not, if it has some kind of way that you can see that it's adjacent to those things, it's going to kind of get you with like-minded people to some extent. Take advantage of those. If you're still in school and stuff like that, there's probably groups there too, so take advantage of those. Definitely surround yourself with like-minded people, and realistically, there's just so much information out there that you're not going to find it all yourself, but you're going to find out about the things you forgot or you forgot to look for, or you didn't see by hearing about them from someone else. It's like, man, this is really neat, So take advantage of that. It's a big deal. Mentorships. A lot of people don't think about this. Go out and find someone with more experience than you and ask questions. It doesn't have to be in your local town. It could be anywhere. I've had multiple people reach out to me randomly on LinkedIn. I still mentor several people at this point, helping them with everything for, hey, I'm applying for a job tomorrow, and I think they're going to ask this question. How should I respond? To what should I do about, getting into this industry? What's the right path? What are the things I need to learn? To now I'm in this job and I don't know how to do this exploit. Can you help me out with it? I'm not saying reach out to me. There's a lot of you here, but I'm just saying, like, that is an opportunity. There are people out there who are happy to do that kind of stuff. Look into it and try to find those people and take advantage of it and use it. And that's not just for red team. A lot of these are not just for red team. These apply on both sides. Realistically, it can be very beneficial for you if you're looking to try to get in the mind of the other person, to find a mentor that's on the blue side if you're looking to go into the red, who can tell you about some of the detection methods, who can tell you how they'd hunt certain things. We were talking in our breakout room before this, and someone was asking about how to kind of practice some of the incident response type stuff or the threat hunting type stuff. And one of the things I said, is if you can get some of these attacks in your lab environment, your home lab environment, then go for them. But maybe you find someone who is a red team type mentor, and they can just kind of help you with that side of things. They can get in your environment and leave some IOCs for you and let you try to find those, right? Work with other people. People are fantastic. Some of them.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Eric, about a lot of this being applicable to both. One of the main things, though, we do want to make sure that you understand is you do have to have an RGB, LED-enabled keyboard, mouse, and possibly a chair for either red or blue side. So keep that in mind. Totally
obviously
joking.
A black hoodie if you're going to be on the red team.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Totally joking there, but and I'll read this next one here just because I know Eric's modest, but experiment with both sides, see what calls to you more. Just put a note in here. Honestly, for a lot of folks, this is the red offensive side. It always looks like more fun. Even on the blue side, it always looks like more fun to me, so I get it. But then, Eric, I know the last point there is a big one for you as well.
On what you just said, the scripting.
The scripting, yeah.
Well, in response to that one, the more people, it's red or offensive. I disagree with this. A lot of people that are going to school, almost all of the study, all of the training is about defense, or it's about compliance or regulations and stuff like that. And most people, I feel like, end up there. But maybe that's the more glamorous side. Oh, fine. As far as the scripting and coding, yeah, you're gonna probably, I'm not gonna say you're gonna likely need it. I won't say you're gonna need it. You can get by without it in a lot of situations, especially if you have a team of people. If you're doing this alone, you're probably gonna need it, right? But it only, again, helps to have that, to be able to, one, create your own things, right? Create your own tools. Two, modify tools that might not be working correctly or might be outdated. Maybe you find some old Python 2 thing, but you can't get it to work and you need it to go in Python 3, like being able to adjust them and make them work for your situation. Or on top of it, it's extremely important that, especially when you're working with clients, but even when you're just working alone and you're working on labs or you're working on CTFs or whatever it might be, it's extremely important to know what the code that you're running on your machine does. There definitely have been people who have released malicious tools, if you will, and said, "Oh, this is to exploit. This is a POC for a CVE for this, piece of software," and then you run it, and it actually attacks you, right? And so, being able to go through and take a look at that kind of stuff and prevent harm to your own machine and is important. But on top of it, you need to make sure that if you're ever working with a client, you're not accidentally opening them up to an attack from a third party. The tool that you're using is only going to do what you need it to do, and it's doing the right thing, and things like that. So there's a lot of situations where knowing some scripting and coding can be extremely useful for sure. Pinky had power.
We're a little short on time.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a quick time check. It's 5:45 p.m. and we do have some questions from the audience, but here's just a time check.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah, and one other thing too is just to note, we're going to pop into our breakout after this because we were afraid we'd run a little bit long. But so for any questions that overflow, we can always help you out in there as well too. But here's some free tools as well if you want to grab a quick screenshot of that to help out from both sides, and then we'll jump over the questions.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you both, Eric and Pinky, for the talk. And our first question from the audience is, what would you advise individuals on the fence between the glamour of offensive pen testing and less glorified defensive approach? This is from Christopher Roman on the YouTube.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I was just going to say, it is very much whatever calls to you the most, right? But so from the blue side, if you kind of like being on that defensive side of things and you like putting the things in place to sort of help protect and take a look at that, I think that's if that calls to you more, definitely go that route. Look at some of the resources we have here in the tools and talk to like Eric said, find folks that are working in it and talk to them. Eric, I'll let you go ahead on the.
I would just say that it's not as glamorous as I think as a lot of people think it is, right? It is very, very fulfilling if that's what you're passionate about and you want to do. If you're doing it for the glamour, it's going to wear off quickly when you're writing reports and writing another report and writing another report. So definitely do what calls to you because you're passionate about it, not because you think it's glamorous.
All right. Our next question from the Discord channel, it's from Calc on Discord. Do you ever look directly for vulnerabilities as zero-day research?
Yeah, to some extent. It is definitely an area that we, have to pass on a lot of times because, we have projects, we have things we got to do. But when given, free time or when we have free time, that's an area that, I think a lot of penetration testers and red teamers are always looking to do. Especially if you have a background in reverse engineering or maybe a little bit more in-depth analysis of some of the protocols or the way things are working. Yeah.
And from Call Me Coach on YouTube, when getting started moving towards the red team, would you recommend going wide, such as learning a little about injection, a little about access controls, etc., or going deep on a topic at a time?
I would definitely recommend, like, if you're just getting started in it, you probably don't have the experience and the exposure at this point to know exactly where you want to go. So I would recommend staying pretty wide, but being aware of all the different areas that it could be channeled into. That way you can be conscious of looking into those things as you get exposure or the ability, the resources to see those things, especially if you get hired at a company and they're doing those other things, that you can try to make sure you're getting a view of all of it so that you can start to narrow down what you want to do.
All right. Here's a question that's more oriented to the both of you. I know the past few have been more red team focused. So do you have any tips on how to shift from a more CTF based, there's definitely a bug here mindset to a more real world, maybe there's a bug here, maybe isn't one? This is again from Call Me Coach on YouTube.
Yeah, so I'll jump in on the blue side of that first. Just kind of like Eric talked about earlier as well. Kind of getting to that point of knowing what looks normal and what not, and a lot of that's just experience, right? Like Eric said, set up some of the systems that you expect to be defending. From the defense side, go in your home labs if you can and build an Active Directory. Set that thing up. Make some group policies. Do some different things like that. That are Active Directory tasks, and understand the challenges that are involved there. When you get done with that, try to turn on PowerShell remoting and see how that works, and you'll find all kinds of bugs. But do things like that to understand what's normal, what's a normal configuration, what's an abnormal configuration. At least from the blue side, it's a lot of that practice and exposure just to those types of things.
Yeah, and I saw the question come through when I was looking at the YouTube chat too, and there's more about it, kind of saying, as a new bug bounty hunter and having struggles with this, I could say this, myself and everyone on my team struggle with it still. So I don't have the best answer, right? But what I can say is that what gets us through it is, obviously, as we're employed doing this, we have time constraints, and we have to make sure that we're giving a good product to someone, right? Like, what comes out of our work is useful. And so the time constraints make us shift focus and continue looking for more somewhere else. When you're doing bug bounties or when you're doing a CTF, I guess those are two different things, but you don't have so much the time constraint, right? So you just have the kind of frustration constraint, I'd say. If anything, you're sitting there going like, am I just too frustrated to continue, right? Or not? Try to give yourself some time constraints maybe, and don't treat every single CTF like it has a flaw that you have to find. I mean, they do, right? Obviously, it's kind of hard to trick yourself that they don't, but instead just be like, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to work on this, hack the box or CTF or whatever it might be, and say I'm going to spend this much time on it, and be able to walk away from it when you don't have it by then, because some are harder than others, and some you're not going to get, some you don't have the skill, like you said in your question, and then some, maybe there's just not something there, but it'll start getting you the ability to walk away and not rabbit hole and not get frustrated, and actually show a lot of patience in those areas. And it'll start to help. Again, you'll never defeat it. At least not in my experience. I haven't, but it's steps like that can help it be easier.
Yeah, wow, thank you. That's pretty reassuring and great advice for both in a CTF and also in a professional real world experience. So the next question for FRSecure is, what certifications, training, or courses led you down the blue or red path? And this is from Shane Rodriguez in the Discord Q&A chat.
Yeah. So from the blue side, it was less about certifications. Those kind of came later. I was a sysadmin for a long time, working in a lot of secure industries. So, banking, healthcare, some government, that type of thing. And so just getting that experience to the security world from there, but from a sysadmin perspective, sort of led me down this path. And I think Eric and I both have talked about it a fair bit. We both had sort of, we'll call them security backgrounds, and leave it at that. So you kind of end up in these areas where you have this interest and you enjoy the security side of things, and sort of went down that way. As for certifications and that type of thing, though, most are really helpful. I've mentioned some things like Active Directory. Understanding that, getting some exposure there, maybe not necessarily certification, but then just specifically on defensive certifications. If you check out some of the SANS courses, a lot of those are really great. A lot of the SANS certifications, in particular the GCFA, that's the GIC Certified Forensic Analyst, is a great one. There's so much good information in there, and it'll if you're kind of inclined in that way, it'll probably pique your interest pretty well.
All right, sounds good. I think we have time for about one more question. So from YouTube, John the Ripoff is asking, how often do red and blue teams work together for a client?
I'd say not if we look at it like in relation to other types of things, at least what we're doing, right? It's not often, and the reason is because there's a lot of people that are just wanting, wanting pen testing or wanting incident response, and they're trying to kind of check those boxes and make sure they have what they have on that. We start looking at more of the purple teaming, the collaboration between both teams coming into play when people have very mature programs and they've already done what they need to do to satisfy whatever requirements they have, and they're looking to just better themselves beyond that, and that's difficult. And it's not so much a reflection of that team or our services or anything like that. It comes down to budgets and all kinds of other things and cost of businesses, and there's a lot into it. But it's unfortunately not enough. But throughout the year, I mean, like right now, I know we have I think 7 of them on the books in total in some form or another this year. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I know our teams talk a lot. I'll say that. I mean, but maybe not necessarily just for the client, but
Yeah.
oftentimes we'll bounce things off of each other and that type of thing. Like, hey, Eric, I'm seeing this. What does that look like to you, or something like that? So a little
Yeah,
bit
in
of that, but
particular, if we're
formally.
talking about our teams, we collaborate a ton. But I mean, I
Yeah.
think it's a generic in general, like I think it's not happening as much as it should, but
Great.
it is happening.
All right. One last question from the Discord, and then we'll shift off to the breakout rooms. So this is from Natural20 in the Q&A channel on Discord. Would you recommend a place to learn 1, container escape techniques, and 2, ICS exploitation? And this person is asking, preferably without needing to spend a lot on something like a SANS course. Thank you very much.
One quick one, Eric. I mean, I think if they roll a natural 20, they just get out, right? They get to escape the container.
Yeah, I think you just
Oh,
crit,
okay.
you just escape. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
you're fine.
yeah.
I don't have good resources on that off the top of my head. I can say that for container escapes, anytime I've ever played with it, I've set up something in a lab. As far as like a place out there to learn about them, it's difficult, and a lot of the information, a lot of the things that I've gone that have kind of led me to, and I haven't done a ton of it, so I'm being transparent on that. But the bit that I have done and what I've messed with, I was led down that route from Twitter posts. So following, I mean, a lot of people in the security, in like the pen testing side or the research side and security side, they love their Twitter and they post a lot of things on there. And so if you're not on there, maybe to some extent go research that. As far as the other one was about industrial control systems, is that what it was?
I see it.
Yeah. So that can be difficult too, to find an environment to test that in and stuff like that. And honestly, if you're looking just for information on how to test it, a lot of it really just comes down to segmentation and testing a lot of that kind of things, and is more so than the actual systems that are involved in it. I mean, there's definitely room for that, and I've seen some courses, but they have been pretty expensive. But honestly, a lot of it comes down to just keeping a lot of that stuff secured in different ways, I'd say, first and foremost, and that's a lot of our focus goes toward. There's some CTFs I know that are free CTFs at DEF CON. There's ICS related, like 3 different ones, I think, last year and the year before and the year before. I mean, there's Hack the Planet. There's a couple other, I just can't think of their names off the top of my head. Look into those. Those are fun. They get you some exposure to it. I've definitely participated in them and enjoyed it.
All right. Thank you so much, Rick and Pinky. At this time, I think we'll be showing the CTF flag in a short on screen. And thank you to all the 60 people who are watching, and feel free to join FRSecure in their breakout room if you have any additional questions. Thank you.